So, welcome back, everyone. Um, we'll continue with our next speaker. Really looking forward to this one. Dr. Philip Graham Smith, Head of Biomechanics and Innovation at Aspire Academy. And he'll talk about take it or leave it and tell us about what to look for when selecting technologies in a sports performance environment. Yeah, without any further ado, I would like to hand over the word to Philip.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation to speak to you this afternoon. It's a real pleasure. I've been working with Xsens for many years, since my time with the English Institute of Sport. And we bought our first system there, and since moving to Aspire, we bought 2 further systems. So I'm a big fan of Xsens, and I sing its praises a lot. So I'm going to go a little bit broader than Xsens today. I'm going to talk about identifying the right technology to make an impact in high-performance sport. Just to give you a bit of background, I'm working at Aspire Academy at the moment. If nobody knows where that is, it's in the center of the earth. It's in Qatar, which is in the Middle East. It's got an amazing skyline, and hopefully many of you will come over to the World Cup to witness that yourselves later this year. This is Aspire. It's an incredible facility in Aspire Zone. We have Aspire Academy, the Aspire Dome, and Aspetar Hospital, all on one site, as well as the big iconic Torch Hotel and the Khalifa Stadium. This is another hotel there, the Azizia Boutique Hotel in the grounds of Aspire Zone. And this is inside Aspire Dome itself. It's an indoor football stadium with a 4G turf. On the other side, we've got basketball courts, we've got a 50-meter indoor pool, diving area, we've got table tennis, squash, we've got biomechanics labs with a Vicon system there. And the indoor athletics track, which is actually a lab in its own right, because we have here many force platform housings. And there's currently 14 force platforms actually, sorry, 16 force platforms actually embedded into the track here, which we use very frequently. This is a new extension to Aspire. This is a football performance center. And this is an example of the inside of that, where we've got an AstroTurf pitch with more force platforms for our football biomechanics. So that's a bit of background about Aspire, where I currently work, but I've been working in high performance sport for 30 years now. And my philosophy around how I work has changed. The more I work closely with athletes on a day-to-day basis, it's changed the way of thinking. And I'd say, I'd summarize that as adopting a performance solutions approach to athlete support and/or research. And this is how we go about developing athletes and innovating practice. And for those of you that have done a bit of background about myself, you may also realize that I'm a co-founder of ForceDex, which is one of those technologies which I quote has been a game changer in the way force platforms are used in high performance settings. And there's currently 500 and more professional sports teams or institutes around the world that have adopted that system. So that's probably one of my biggest achievements in this profession and something I'm proud of, but it's not the only thing. So this is what I'm going to talk about today. I've given it the term take it or leave it. That's basically playing on my Yorkshire upbringing, where take it means take it. So it's a little bit of a joke for me to play on there. We'll talk about the high performance sport paradigm, and then we'll look about how biomechanics information is being used and question this research versus performance solutions approach. We'll also look at criteria for selecting technology for primarily use in high performance sport, and I'll give you some examples of workflows and output from my work with athletics. So more and more we find ourselves in this data-driven technological culture in high-performance sport, and we create business cases to set up and deliver our performance programs. And the philosophy of success is based on the more money we can spend on technology and or facilities, the better our performance outcomes will be. Now, I say that tongue in cheek because I don't actually believe that, but here we go. The assumption is that data drives performance. Evidence-based research justifies a means to adopt this approach, and high-tech solutions are essential to developing athletes. And the more sophisticated the technology, the better the outcomes will be. So the answer to all performance outcomes has got to be, therefore, get more access to funds, employ experts to do research, and create new laboratories and equip them with all the latest gadgets. Now, I say that with tongue in cheek because that is a common misconception around sports science, particularly by people who don't work in high performance sport. And as I said before, my attitude and the way I operate has changed dramatically since leaving an academic setting to work full time in high performance sport. So I want to just get you to think about your current role and what your main drivers and non-negotiables are. And they could be from this list here: data quality, publications, research income, experimental control, cost, time, environmental validity, interventions, innovation, sales, decision making, winning, communication, or athlete engagement. And these are all very relevant and valid drivers that we all may face to some or greater extent. So if we put all that into the mix, what comes out within the high performance sport paradigm? So if we just tilt the egg timer up, let's see what pops out first. In high performance sport, we're really looking at performance being the real driver. And that is underpinned by time, the ability to make decisions, to communicate, to do interventions from it. And then we're getting into another tier where we're looking at the quality of the information, the environment that we conduct our work in, engaging athletes, the cost plays some factor, and innovation. But what you don't see generally are research income, experimental control, sales or publications being the major driving force. That they might well be some byproducts, but they're not the main driving forces. So just to give this some context, coaches are paid to improve an athlete's or a team's performance, and that performance is based on time and decision making primarily. And our job as practitioners working with coaches and using technology is about helping coaches make the best decisions that will or could lead to better or faster outcomes. And from a biomechanics point of view, we base that knowledge on cause and effect, understanding Newton's laws or biomechanical principles. But ultimately, it's about providing the right information to make the right decision at the right time. And I just go at the bottom saying here, whether you're a researcher, applied practitioner, or a technologist, it is important to respect your main drivers or priorities, but you've also got to understand the drivers of your end users. So let's have a look at how biomechanics information is used. And I'm categorizing this into three columns. Interesting. So research generally is initiated by a performance question. Data is generated on high quality athletes that profile the demands of an event. They're collected in the most informative environment, like competition or training. And an example of that could be some reports done at major championships. However, the caveat to that is that you may get one or the best effort per athlete, inconsistencies in methods to compare across numerous championships, and they do lack the holistic understanding of the athlete. There's more to a performance than just what they did on that particular day. Then we can look at impactful work, impactful biomechanical information. So the information is initiated from within a support team. The solution or method designed to answer the performance issue is created by that team. There's continuous data collection in training, competition, provides instant feedback. It builds up this holistic profile of the athlete. We present that visually and clearly. We compare it against norms through athlete management systems. There's an ability to interact with wider data sets, model and predict with data analytics. And this directly influences decisions and is transparent to performance outcomes. Now, the third part, noise. And I say this again with a little bit of cheek, because I think there is a lot of poor quality research or biomechanical information out there just for the sake of publishing things. I'm a little bit old now, and I don't like to be controversial, but I don't mind being controversial. But I think the noise stems from research being fueled by one's own interest. It satisfies some curiosity. It fulfills another agenda. That could be publications or a thesis. Often performed on low-level athletes with low numbers, tenuous conclusions, and limited application. And yes, they may get citations a few times in the literature, but I'd say this can be more harmful than good to applied practitioners trying to do something impactful in sport. And this is the difference really between research-driven information and performance-driven information. And I go as far to say that there are some excellent practitioners out there who use biomechanical information and do impact performance, and they would not regard themselves as biomechanists at all. So that just gives you an overview of my current thoughts on how information is being used for different purposes. So what's the reality then? Success isn't just about money, experts, research, and technology. Research doesn't drive success. It's performance solutions or answers to performance questions that do. Experts with an understanding of the performance issue are really important. The application of science into performance solutions is the key. And learning from experience and that of other team members, even young members, coaches, athletes themselves, all this should feed into the performance paradigm. It's interventions that drive performance. The science and the technology can assist in making good decisions or making them quicker. Technology doesn't have to be sophisticated, and sometimes it's not even required. And your athlete's performance is the focus. It's not you or your technology, and that is the reality of high performance sport, really. So we need to follow a process to understand how to solve a performance issue. So we start with the problem, and we've got to define it. Then we adopt a filter. What do we already know, and what do we really need to know? There's a lot of information out there already, some of it good, some of it bad, as I've just said before. We've got to look at the outlook. You know, how will it inform decisions or interventions? And what's the bigger picture? Are there broader issues that we can tackle at the same time? We've got to look at the context. Is it a generic performance issue, or is it specific to my situation or the athlete in my sport? The source, do we need technology for a starter? If we do, are there existing solutions out there? What technology companies are there that can help us with that solution? Or do we look for bespoke solutions? What's the available expertise? Then we come to the problem solving. We've got to bring teams of people together, the scientists or support team around athletes, software developers, engineers, electrical or mechanical engineers, and data specialists who can really take the data and make use of it. Then the solution comes from all this. We've got to keep it simple and focused on the performance issue. There's cost implications, but in terms of implementation and the way of making things, as we say, game-changing, we've got to engage end users, which are essentially our coaches and athletes from the outset. The impact is based on utilization and the tangible link to performance outcomes. So within the impact, we've got the quality of information, which is essential, which relates to the accuracy and precision of the measurement, and that is generally the technology. And then we've got the speed of analysis and availability for instant use, which is generally the platform or the interface that we're using. So that this then relates to the quality of presentation. Is it visually appealing and engaging? Is it easy to understand? Is it interactive? But ultimately, to make something impactful, we've got to understand where the information fits into the holistic athlete profile, their program and performance goals. And we've got to understand how the coach can use that information to do some training interventions and find a way of resolving the issue. So I want to put forward now some ideas around criteria for selecting technology for use in high performance sports. Now, we don't all live in areas of the world where we've got lots of money. And I'd even say that Qatar is not flowing with resources at the minute either, financial resources, that is. So we've got a financial factor in it, of course, as we all do. But then we've got to look at data quality. Now, we need to make sure that we've got solid accuracy of measurement. And there's a scale here that I've created. Is it very high accuracy or very low? Clearly, we don't want anything that's got very low accuracy. Validity. Are the metrics that we're collecting, are they related to the mechanisms of injury or performance that we're looking to quantify? Environmental validity, things like shoe surface characteristics. There's a lot of biomechanical technologies that are done in or testing that are done in laboratories, which have got a lino type surface where the athletes are told to change direction, or they do it on Mondo athletics track in a lab, and they're trying to replicate something related to football. There is very definitely an issue in doing that because friction forces affect positions. So looking at environmental validity is also an important criteria there. Depth of information, we just graded it from very good down to insufficient or acceptable if you can combine it with other data from other systems. So we've got financial, data quality, and then we've got time or athlete experience or convenience. Now, in order to make it an interesting, engaging experience for your athletes, we don't want to take too much time. So the travel is a consideration. Can you do the testing on site in the same building that the athlete's in, or do they have to travel? Is it a long distance, short distance? Does it include a flight? There are times when going to specific centers is important to get very specific treatments or tests, but invariably we need the testing on site. The equipment setup, is it ready to go, or does it take over 30 minutes to prepare the equipment and calibrate it? The athlete setup, can they just turn up and do something that we can analyze or collect data on, or does it take about 30 minutes to put markers on, or EMG or other technology? It's about the invasiveness of the testing to the athlete. And then the data collection. Can you collect data on more than one athlete at once? Can it just do one athlete at a time? Does it auto detect? Less clicks of buttons? All these things are also factors in the time of the athlete experience and how much time you need with them. The final criteria is about decision making. What can you do with that data, communicating it and the interventions from it? So there's a processing and analysis time. So some technologies now will save things directly into the cloud. Other times you've got to manually process it. It could take half a day in some cases to process information. The length of time to process will have an adverse effect on the usability of that information when you want to make decisions. Does it report things instantly, directly within a session? Is it within 30 minutes of the session, which can still have an impact? Or is it taking half a day, a full day, or several days to process that information? And then does it link to athlete management systems? If it does, that information can look at an athlete profile within seconds of a test being done. So these are the drivers that we'll look at when we're looking at purchasing new technology or creating new technologies or software for that matter. And then just to give it an assessment at the bottom, from game-changing, effective for specialist assessment only, is it too long, or is it ineffective as my criteria? And I'm going to show you now a few examples of technologies that I've used for many years, which are part and parcel of my toolbox, if you like. First one is the LAVEG laser speed gun. I've used this with athletics. It gives me instantaneous speed, and I'm able to use it there and then in a training session and give information back to a coach or an athlete about how fast they're going over split times, 20 meter, 40 meters, flying 20s, or peak speed and distance to peak speed. I can even use it for run-up speeds on pole vault, long jump, triple jump, things like that. The grading of this system is here. That's how I would classify the LAVEG, and that's why I use it very regularly in Qatar and previously with work with UK Athletics in the UK. And I'd say there are some things that could be improved with the LAVEG, but it's a very effective tool for me in my practice. The next one is just high-speed cameras. Here we've got pictures of the Casio Exilim. Quite honestly, now I use my Samsung Note 20 5G Ultra. It's got a great camera. It does high-speed filming, and the benefit of that is I can edit videos straight away and send them to my athletes and coaches on WhatsApp. So sharing information is very quick. So high-speed cameras, iPhones, Samsungs, whatever it might be, are again an effective use of technology within high-performance sport. Then we've got the force decks. Here we've got Liverpool using two systems side by side. So it actually does multi-athlete data capture all through one laptop, which is a first in the force platform world. If you're interested, I'm not going to harp on about force decks, but if you're interested, please have a look on the VALD website. There's some interesting information on there. My grading there is game changer, as obviously it would be. But as I said before, that has been referred to in multiple articles, press, and one of the awards that it's won for its application in sport. The Biodex, not the most portable of devices, but this fits an area of assessment that I need, particularly for measuring eccentric strength of quadriceps and hamstrings from an injury perspective and also performance perspective, which I'll show you later. So that's not as well assessed. It comes out as effective as a specialist assessment only, but it's still part and parcel of my delivery. Xsens, got to include Xsens. I'd say that we don't use it as often as we could or potentially could, but in terms of motion capture, it would be my go-to. I wouldn't use it as often as my normal video camera, but when the need arises, that would be my go-to motion capture device. And just to give you a bit more information about the Xsens. So this is how we've used it for looking at one athlete performing a few skills from a training load perspective. So we captured some data on force plates and through Xsens to look at joint movements, accelerations and ground reaction forces. This was doing a standing triple jump. So we built up an array of different plyometric type drills that our athletes were doing. Another one was repeated hopping, flying hops, and that gave us some indication of the demands of plyometric training. But we've also used it in high jumping as well. So it can be a little bit more specific to their actual performance. And I've used Xsens now for 12 years, from working with English Institute of Sport. We did some work with Manchester City players, and I've never ever had the same response from using any other motion capture system than I did with a Manchester City player who just wanted to dance. He did Gangnam, he did Michael Jackson. I've never seen a player or athlete engage with a motion capture system as much as that. But although it can give us immediate information, which is great, here we see information on the height of the center of mass for the high jumper and velocities. We would extract that and create a report which looks at the motion path of the athlete, and you can see quite clearly here that this is the same graph of the height of the center of mass, clearly an important factor in high jumping. But we've recreated our own little template to look at a number of metrics here: velocities, projection angles, knee angles, leg plant angles, the use of the free limbs as examples of relevant information that we can use with the coaches. So I'll give you an example now of the work we've done with some long and triple jumpers. It has to start with genuine performance questions. What performance outcome do we want? We've got a long jumper. We're needing to get a world junior standard. So we've got a performance outcome measure there already. Then we say, what would it take for that athlete to win a medal? You know, is he at that ability level to actually win something? The question is, breaking that down then to how fast would he need to be on the runway? Should he change his technique in any way? And this is where the research has supported my understanding of long jumping technique. It was my apprenticeship really manually digitizing lots and lots of cinefilm way back in the early 90s as part of a support program with UK Athletics. And that informed my knowledge of this takeoff phase. So there is a place for research. and it's how it fits into the overall performance solutions approach, really. Then there's questions about how strong or powerful do I need to be? If I want to adopt that technique, what should my physical characteristics look like? And what we've done here is other metrics on speed, strength, power in a more controlled way to build up that profile of the athlete. And we will go into a little bit more detail later. And other things like how can I manage risk and avoid injury, and what should my program include? So you can see at the bottom there, we've just got some work I did with John McMahon as part of his undergraduate degree at Salford, and we presented that at an ISBS conference, looking at leg stiffness, joint moments, joint power, doing a simulated hopping test. So we need to understand the workflow. If you're going to develop technologies or implement technologies, you need to understand where it all fits together. So what does it take to win? We've got to set the scene, we've got to gather some performance analytics. So what is the current level, or the current performance level of your athlete? And what is that gap in performance that you're trying to cover? So how do we close that performance gap, which is where we need deeper intelligence? So we break down the performance to what would that performance look like in terms of speed or technique, and what would that athlete need to look like in terms of the attributes and capacities physically? Is it achievable? If it is, we then look at developing the program, developing that plan, setting performance targets and milestones, tracking competition, training and testing data over time. We evaluate progress. We're re-evaluating the performance targets, which then leads us to redefining or refining the needs and modifying the program. But these are the areas where technology really comes in. Being able to answer these really pertinent questions of what would that performance look like, and what would the athlete need to look like to achieve that? And this is where the performance questions and performance issues come to the forefront. And this is where the use of technology gets embedded. So if you want to have a look at this, it gives an overview of what it would have taken Christian Taylor to break the men's world record. I was fortunate enough to work with Jonathan Edwards. His world record is now stood for 26 years, which is absolutely incredible, really. Christian Taylor, been fortunate to meet him a number of times, and through Paul Bryce in the UK, he worked with him, and together we put this article together for the World Championships in 2019. Sadly, Christian's retired now, suffering an Achilles tendon rupture, but if you want to have a bit of an interest in how we would go about defining what it would take, then please download this from the Aspetar journal. It's a free download online. So let's have a look at the flow chart. We start by saying, how well does the athlete utilize his or her approach speed? Speed is going to be the biggest factor that determines success. So we have here an athlete who we're plotting their speed against distance, and we see his data points is above the standard deviation line. So all this is saying is, what approach speed do we need to develop generally to attain an official distance of, in this case, 7 meters. And we can see that the dots are above the plus standard deviation line. So for that athlete, we would say develop more speed, go faster, and hopefully you'll go further. The athlete at the bottom graph here on the left, the faster he was running, the worse he was getting. So there's just no way you would tell him to run faster. So this is how we would take data from the LAVEG on the runway and say, this is what we would expect you to be able to achieve. If you can't, there's some other issue. And that other issue will be either technique related or control. We can look at modeling the last step and take off using video analysis, and we can evaluate whether that step is too long or too short. And you can see just by playing around with this graph, the athlete did a 2m11 last step and jumped 675. But by reducing it to 1m80 with the same body positions and the same interaction with the ground, he could actually jump 731. And this is exactly what we did over a period of 2 or 3 weeks leading into a national championships. His last step length was 183 and he jumped 729. So I was very pleased with that. But it wasn't so much the exactness of this, it was the message that we conveyed to the athlete. Shorten your last step, become more efficient, and you will achieve a new PB. The other thing with a triple jump, we don't want them to overcook any single phase. Typically, they try and go too far in their hop, which kills the step and the jump. So we've got to find this balance, and we've got information stretching back many years, which gives good indications of what typical phase distances should be. Then we evaluate takeoffs. We're looking at some critical performance indicators like leg placement angle, trunk angle, how active their leg is upon contact with the ground. We were looking at their response to impact, how they control the landing, these huge forces that they experience. So we're looking at how much the knee flexes and how much the hip adducts. And we can see here an image of Phillips Adawu landing in his off his step, and you can see there's quite a lot of hip adduction there. And then we're evaluating the physical attributes as well. So those things before were related to jumping, long triple jumping, but we need to make sure that they do have the qualities to be able to withstand these forces and these speeds. So we measure, again using the LAVEG, we do a 40-meter sprint. We get an acceleration over 20 time, we get a 40-meter time, or the flying 20 to 40 meters, and we also get peak speed. We've got strength measures. We use an iso squat, where the knee angle is set to 135 degrees, and the bar, the hip, and the ankle are in vertical alignment. Very quickly and easily done using force plates. For eccentric quads and hamstrings, for patella tendonitis issues with or jumper's knee as it's called in our youth athletes, we do Biodex testing. That's a very young Phil. We've got some criteria that we know that our boys can push 6.5 body weights plus in this iso squat. The ones that often go on to world junior level exhibit those characteristics. And for eccentric quads, we're looking at 5.5 body weights as a good indicator of eccentric strength of the quadriceps. We've got power and reactive strength testing, which we use counter movement jump and drop jumps. And again, we use the force dex for the strength and power testing. And we do standing long jump, 5 bounds and 5 hops off left and right legs. And what that allows us to do is build up this profile here. And we know when our boys, the academy, are getting to the above average level, we know that they have a good ability to be able to get into World Junior Championships. So in terms of the drivers of success in high performance sport, practitioners need to understand what their role is and the expectations placed on them. So there's an accountability. They've got to provide quality information to coaches and other support team members like S&C coaches, physiotherapists, so that they can all act on that information as quickly as possible, preferably within a session, or they plan to follow on after those sessions with supplementary training. There is need for creativity and innovation to find solutions to performance-related issues. I think that's been one of the strengths we've got with my team at Aspire. There's lots of creativity going around to solving problems. There is a lot of technology and methods being adopted at the minute, which is, if I'm being overly critical, I would say that it's driven from a research perspective or papers that are being published rather than the need of the sport or the athlete. So it's a word of caution, really. Don't just copy something that someone's published. You've got to critically evaluate whether that test or that technology is appropriate for your performance issue. Data accuracy, validity have got to be paramount in your choice of technology, and they've got to be linked to the performance outcomes or mechanisms of injury. This is one of the reasons why I think the Node board has been so successful from VALD, is that it's a great measure of eccentric or isometric hamstring strength, which directly links to a mechanism of injury. We should try and make things as less invasive as possible and more engaging. The more engaging it is and the more applicable, the better chance we've got of making it impactful. And another word of caution really is we can collect so much data from GPS, from force plates, from motion capture, everything. Our job is not to bombard coaches and athletes with as much data as we can. Our job is to reduce it to the most meaningful parts of the data to make the application easier and much more concise. And the information that we collect has got to build the holistic athlete profile. The final decision that we may propose as a recommendation may not be what the athlete wants or the coach wants, but all we can do is contribute information. So for technology to be impactful in high performance sports, it has to address the needs of the sport or the performance issue and assist practitioners in contributing information or interventions into the solution. So take it or leave it. It boils down to this: defining the right performance questions, finding the most appropriate solution to make the right decisions and intervention at the right time. That's my presentation over. Thank you for your attention, and hopefully there'll be a chance for a few questions now.
Thanks, Philip. That was very interesting and informative, and especially from my role at Kinduct, I like the part where you say data should be easy accessible, instead of making it more complicated. It's a part I really liked personally. There's a few questions. First question was, what wide health problems have you seen in biomechanics in elite sport, and how have you best seen them addressed with or without tech?
Good question. I have seen a lot of technologies in biomechanics that never ever make an impact. And it goes back to the criteria that I've just listed, really. It's not giving immediate feedback. You've got to make the technology available in the setting that it's going to have most impact. So that means the track. For athletics, it means a track. What coaches don't want to do is give you their athlete for X amount of hours when they could be training. So if it can be incorporated into training, then you've got more chance of, in a least invasive way as possible, you've got more chance of it being adopted. I could not, in all honesty, try to bring athletes down to the biomechanics lab. That's why our indoor track has become our lab. So we've taken the technology into their environment. You know, it's like it's going out onto the street and preaching. This is not about coming into my church, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, nice. Next question. What was the performance target with the player at Manchester City?
Oh, well, that was really He was a player coming back from injury, a long-term injury, and we'd only just got the Xsens system, and bizarrely, we had a choice. We could have gone and asked the player to come into the lab at Salford Uni, or we would just purchase the Xsens with the English Institute of Sport, and that was still learning how to use the system. So it was really an opportunity, really, to go in and just check it out. How would a professional player respond to wearing a bodysuit and a headband? And he absolutely loved it. The performance outcome was really just looking at the area around that specific injury. So we were just it just formed a discussion with the physio afterwards to see, you know, if it was there symmetry between left and right legs on knee flexion, hip flexion, things like that. So it wasn't, I wouldn't say at that point there was any defined criteria or variables that we were looking for at that point, but it formed a discussion and a lot of engagement.
Yeah. Nice. Next question. Have you ever been in a situation where the best data-based decision wasn't made with an athlete? And how was the mistake amended?
Ooh. I don't think I have, actually. I think I alluded to it at the end there. Sometimes what you may recommend may not be the most appropriate. So, I mean, I guess there's one example here. We had a sprinter who responded quite well to eccentric training. He was having lots of stiffness, having done his 2 sprint sessions each week, and his recovery time was a lot longer than it should have been. And then the following year, they decided not to do one bout. So, sorry, just to recap on that. We then put him onto an isokinetics once a week for 6 weeks, and those tightness issues went away. Didn't need as much recovery time, but the following year, they decided not to do the Biodex, and his recovery time increased again. But my recommendation was, let's throw the isokinetic back in. But the coach said, no, I don't want to do that. I don't know what they did, why, but you just got to accept it.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answered it, the question or not, but
yeah,
I think bottom line, you've got to know your place. You know, if you're part and parcel of a team, sometimes the coach might know something different to you about the athlete. You just got to accept it at times. You can do is offer your best information.
Yeah, makes sense. Question from Soram. What biomechanics screening procedures are in place at Aspire to monitor MSK loading longitudinally?
Okay, I think we do tend to do a screen of joint range of motion, some handheld dynamometer stuff, which the physios do different times within the year. But over the course of the year, we are building in interventions really that are based on injury or injury risk. And I say injury risk, it's not necessarily just an individual athlete. For the squads that we've got in the jumpers, for example, we know that jumpers knee patella tendonitis is an issue with that age group. So we build in Spanish squat, you know, on a weekly basis into their training as more of a preventative intervention, and that's paid dividends. So we've not necessarily monitored anything there, but we've put in an intervention, and I think that's a key point really. Data provides information, but interventions solve the problem. Data in itself doesn't solve the problem. It just gives some help towards a decision, right? But what we also do is look at fatigue monitoring at the beginning and end of the week. So our weekend is Friday, Saturday. On a Sunday, we will do a warm-up, and then they'll do several counter movement jumps with a reactive jump on the back of it. So we're looking at jump height and reactive strength index on a Sunday when they're fresh, and also on a Thursday afternoon after their last session. So we're getting a week, twice weekly, bi-weekly jump testing to see how they're responding to training Sunday to Sunday to Sunday, and also during the week. And we're looking to evaluate whether they're getting into a hole and whether they need recovery time or not. And we're doing that across several of the athletics groups and football. So we're looking at the effect of training to be able to make an intervention. We're not necessarily quantifying training load per se. We've looked at that, what would be required to do that. We could wear accelerometers, GPS, we could wear foot insoles, but for the amount of data that it gives us, we can look at it another way in what are the response to training from which we can have an intervention on. And invariably, the results of the bi-weekly jump testing sparks conversations with the athletes. What have you been doing? What's going on? Is there something bothering you? Is it a school-related issue? Is it a family-related issue? And then we can put other interventions in place. It's not always physical. So it's been quite pragmatic, really, about how we use data and in what context. So hopefully that addresses that point there.
Yeah. There's one more question. Do you see biomechanic assessment as a tool for continuous monitoring, or believe it is best applied in doses for specific questions?
Say that one again.
Do you see biomechanic assessment
as
a tool for continuous monitoring, or believe it is best applied in doses for specific questions?
Yeah, I get it. Both. I think there are some systems that you would be able to get ongoing measurements of technique, for example. It may not include motion capture. It could be a video-based system. As I said before, we use video all the time because it's highly interactive. It's engaging with the boys. We can talk about their technique. So that's still biomechanics. We will quantify things from the video. If there's more of a specific problem like return to play following a hamstring injury, or we want to monitor, symmetry of movement, we put the Xsens suit on. We get them to run over force plates at the same time. We wouldn't necessarily link the pair up, to do inverse dynamics, but we would look at the particular part of the body that we're more interested in. So in that sense, it has got real value, and it's been useful for us. With regards to using it in terms of research questions, then clearly that's a huge area as well. But you tend not to be able to get the best quality athletes to take part in research studies, so that there is a little playoff there as well. So you can use it in both, but it's how you set it all up. If it's agreed within a performance setting, of how you're going to use it, then you'll get more buy-in. Yeah, you've got to demonstrate its worth, really.
Yeah. I guess you could say that that applies to sort of all data that you gather, that you need some sort of buy-in for the players to do, to accept it, or the athlete.
Yeah.
The next question from Deepak: is there any tech application which predicts sports injury in young athletes?
As far as I'm aware, I think there are some groups that are saying they're getting close to that, but I'm not so sure. I do believe that with the with Kitman Labs and other athlete management systems, where we can actually do a lot more deeper interrogation of data, I think we may get to that point, but inherently it's difficult. I think right now, my response to that would be understand or build your flow diagrams about what factors or mechanisms directly relate to those injuries that are more prevalent in the sports that you're working with. So with the jumpers, it's jumper's knee. You've got hamstring injuries for sprinters, adductor injuries. Understand those mechanisms and understand how technique or the physical deficiencies may put an athlete more at risk. And if you work it off basic principles, then you're going to have, you know, an effective support program that you can monitor and also do interventions with on an ongoing basis. But what I mean, I don't think we're at that point where we don't. I don't think we can predict injury just yet. But there are some really obvious warning signs like body mass index, training volume, nutrition, bad diets. Get your basics in place and you'll reduce your injuries. Simple.
Yeah. Last question. How frequently you face conflicts in convincing the coach with your biomechanical aspects in addressing solutions?
How often? It's funny. There have been times where there's been conflict. It's not regular, I'm pleased to say, but it goes back to the point about knowing where your data fits into this, your information continuum. I would not be able to do a lot of what I do unless I had a very indicative framework of where that data fits and how it can be applied. That's my selling point done. If I'm trying to get an athlete or a coach to buy into something that there's no real transparency of where it fits into a knowledge pathway, then it's just collecting data for the data's sake, and I'm not going to get buy-in there. And I wouldn't even go there with a coach if I wasn't convinced it was where it fit into that continuum. That's where you're going to get your conflict. So, and the other side of that is saying, are you focused on performance outcomes, or are you doing it for research? What is your motive for wanting to do biomechanics? If you're invested in the performance outcome or the injury prevention, whatever it might be, if you're invested in that as your main focus, not research publications, you will get more buy-in. So yep. It's a way of approaching the situation, and don't try to shoehorn technologies in constantly. You know, I would have loved to have been doing Xsens every day. I would love to do that, but the opportunities are few and far between. But I know when the need arises, it's going to be there and it's going to be usable. more so than any other motion capture system.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Philip, I would really like to thank you for being with us today, and I really liked how you made your ideas easy to understand, which in the data science part in sports is quite often quite a challenge to make things easier than more difficult. Yeah, also thank you for answering all the questions, also the people that asked the questions, by the way. And I hope that it was an interesting and educational session for everyone. And unfortunately, due to time, we have to move on to our next speaker. But thank you very much, Philip.
It's been my pleasure. And as I said, big fan of you guys, and would be happy to do anything for you again when the need arises. So thank you very much.